On the night she's shamed at a rich family wake, a quiet widow shields her anxious little boy until a deadly stranger steps in, slices the room to silence, and says, "You're not safe with them. You're safe with me." He offers protection with iron rules and a price. Then the shocks hit fast. A ledger with her name on crimes she didn't commit, a school route ambush, a glittering gala wired like a trap, and a fake bodyguard who almost steals her child. The world calls him a monster, yet with her he's gentle, possessive, unbreakable. But someone close is selling secrets, and the next move will either save their new family or set the city on fire. Is this protection or a beautiful cage? Who betrayed her first? And when the gun smoke clears, will danger make them or destroy them? The leather seats of Dorian's SUV creaked as Hazel settled in, her hands trembling slightly as she helped Theo with his seatbelt. The boy's face was pale, his fingers clutching his favorite dinosaur backpack like a lifeline. Through the bulletproof glass, the Quinn mansion grew smaller, its warm lights now seeming cold and hostile. "You made the right choice," Dorian said from the front seat, his voice low and steady. His eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, dark and unreadable. Hazel swallowed hard, her throat tight. "Did I? Because right now it feels like I'm jumping from one fire into another." She wrapped her arm around Theo, who pressed closer to her side. "Mom," Theo whispered, his voice small. "Did you see how Aunt Paige looked at us when we left? Like we were garbage." "Hey, buddy." Hazel kissed the top of his head, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo. "What matters is that we're together, okay?" The SUV glided through the darkening streets of Boston, two identical black vehicles flanking them front and back. Hazel noticed how Dorian's driver took random turns, doubling back occasionally, never maintaining a predictable pattern. "Your husband," Dorian began, his tone carefully neutral, "left behind more than just debts. The access codes he sold to Ruiz." He paused, glancing at Theo. Hazel got the message. "Theo, honey, why don't you put on your headphones? Remember that new audiobook we downloaded?" Once Theo was safely lost in his story, Hazel leaned forward. "Tell me." "The codes compromise security at 3 major shipping terminals. Ruiz plans to use them to move product through my territory. Product that includes people." Dorian's jaw tightened. "Children." Nausea rolled through Hazel's stomach. "Oh, God!" She pressed a hand to her mouth, thinking of all the times Ethan had come home late, claiming to work overtime. How many lives had he helped destroy? The SUV turned onto a private road, trees looming on either side. Hazel noticed cameras mounted discreetly among the branches, their red lights blinking in the growing darkness. "I can help," she said suddenly, straightening her spine. "I did all the bookkeeping for Ethan's construction company. If he left a trail, I can find it." Dorian turned in his seat, studying her face. "You understand what you're offering? This isn't just about numbers anymore. I understand that my husband's actions put my son in danger." Hazel's voice hardened. "I understand that Ruiz will come for us either way. At least this way we have a chance." A ghost of a smile touched Dorian's lips. "You're nothing like what they described." "Let me guess, Marjorie's version, the gold-digging widow who trapped her precious son?" Hazel's laugh was bitter. "She never forgave Ethan for marrying beneath his station." "Their loss," Dorian said simply. "Your insight could be valuable, but first we need to get you both somewhere safe." The SUV passed through massive iron gates that closed silently behind them. A sprawling estate emerged from the darkness, modern and fortress-like. Unlike the Quinn mansion's ostentatious display of wealth, this place was built for security. "Welcome to the Hale estate," Dorian said as they pulled up to the entrance. "You'll have the east wing to yourselves. My men are clearing your apartment right now, bringing everything essential." Theo pulled off his headphones, eyes wide as he took in the building. "Mom, look at those windows. They're like the ones in spy movies." "Bulletproof," Dorian confirmed, his expression softening slightly as he addressed Theo directly. "The whole place is designed to keep people safe." As they stepped out of the vehicle, Hazel noticed armed guards positioned strategically around the property, nearly invisible in the shadows. The front door opened, revealing a warm interior that somehow managed to feel both luxurious and practical. "Maria will show you to your rooms," Dorian gestured to an older woman who appeared in the foyer. "There's a panic room connected to the master bedroom. Maria will show you how everything works." Hazel nodded, exhaustion suddenly hitting her like a wave. The events of the day, the wake, the threats, The revelation of Ethan's betrayal felt surreal. Tomorrow, Dorian continued, we'll talk about those ledgers. For now, rest. You're both safe here. As Maria led them upstairs, Hazel couldn't help but look back. Dorian stood in the foyer, his powerful frame silhouetted against the dim light, phone already at his ear as he began making calls. Their rooms were spacious and well-appointed, with windows overlooking a garden that Hazel knew would be beautiful in daylight. Theo's room connected to hers through a shared sitting area, already stocked with books and games. The kitchen is always open, Maria explained, her accent softly Spanish. Mr. Hale said to tell you that the chef can prepare anything you need, anytime. After Maria left, Hazel helped Theo get ready for bed, maintaining their normal routine as much as possible. Stories, teeth brushing, their special handshake that always made him smile. Mom? Theo asked as she tucked him in. Are we hiding from bad people? Hazel's heart clenched. We're staying with someone who can protect us while I fix a problem your dad left behind. That's all you need to worry about right now. Once Theo was asleep, Hazel stood at her window, watching the guards patrol the grounds. The Quinn mansion had felt like a prison of expectations and judgment. This place, despite its security and isolation, somehow felt more honest. Her phone buzzed with texts from Paige and Marjorie, threats thinly veiled as concern, demands for explanations. Hazel turned off the phone and placed it in a drawer. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight she needed to process everything that had changed. The moon cast long shadows across the garden as Hazel finally lay down, her mind racing with numbers and codes, with the memory of Dorian's quiet authority and the weight of what she'd agreed to do. The SUV wound through darkened streets, its tinted windows reflecting the city's neon glow. Hazel held Theo close, his Batman backpack clutched between them like a shield. The leather folder of Ethan's papers felt heavy in her lap, evidence of betrayals she hadn't even begun to process. Dorian sat across from them, his presence both reassuring and unnerving. He hadn't spoken since they left the Quinn mansion, but his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, one hand resting near his jacket pocket. The vehicle slowed, entering an underground garage beneath a sleek high-rise, hydraulic barriers lowered behind them with soft, decisive hisses. Two men in tactical gear emerged from a security station, performing a careful sweep before nodding to Dorian. We're here, he said simply, leading them to a private elevator. His handprint activated the panel, and they ascended in silence. The penthouse doors opened to reveal a space that managed to be both luxurious and stark, floor-to-ceiling windows with obvious security features, minimal furniture that probably cost more than Hazel's old apartment, and discreet cameras tracking every angle. Theo scraped his knee, Dorian noted, gesturing to where Theo's pants were torn. A woman in medical scrubs appeared almost instantly, as if summoned by his observation. I'm Lisa, she said, kneeling to Theo's level. Mind if I take a look at that knee, buddy? While Lisa cleaned and bandaged Theo's scrape, Dorian guided Hazel to a glass-walled office. We need to discuss the situation, he said, closing the door but leaving it visible to where Theo sat. Ethan wasn't just in debt, Dorian began, pulling up financial records on a wall-mounted screen. He used your identity to create shell accounts, laundering money for both my organization and Ruiz's. Hazel's stomach dropped. My name is on those accounts? Yes. He forged your signatures, used your social security number. Legally, you're exposed, criminally liable. Dorian's voice remained steady, factual. Ruiz's people are already tracking those accounts. And you. Why would Ethan do this? The question came out barely above a whisper. Gambling debts, mainly. He borrowed from both sides, played us against each other. It worked until it didn't. Dorian leaned against his desk, hands loose at his sides in a way that seemed deliberately non-threatening. You have two choices, Hazel. Both need to be made now. She met his gaze, steeling herself. Tell me. Option 1. Accept my protection. You'll stay here under strict security protocols while we untangle this mess. Option 2. Walk out that door. But understand, Ruiz's snatch crews are already moving, they'll want leverage, and they won't be gentle about getting it. The penthouse kitchen was all gleaming steel and marble, the chef having prepared a late-night sandwich for Theo. Hazel watched her son pick at the crusts, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Dorian positioned himself between her and the windows without seeming to think about it, his body automatically shifting to cover potential sightlines. The security protocols, Hazel said finally, what are they? 'No unauthorized communications. 'No leaving without armed escort. 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 Your phones and devices will be replaced with secured versions. You'll both be under surveillance 24/7. He paused, watching her reaction. I know it sounds extreme, but Ruiz's people are professionals. They're already watching your apartment, your workplace, Theo's school. And you can protect us? Hazel's voice cracked slightly. Yes. The single word carried absolute certainty. I need honesty, she said. Complete honesty. About everything, with what Ethan did, what happens next, all of it. Agreed. Dorian's response was immediate. You'll have access to all relevant information. No lies, no half-truths. The clock crept past midnight as they hammered out details. Dorian showed them to a reinforced guest suite, 2 bedrooms connected by a sitting area with security features that would have seemed paranoid in any other context. My room is down the hall, he said, demonstrating the panic button system. The chef is on call 24/7. We'll meet at 9 tomorrow morning to start working on those accounts. Theo had finally fallen asleep, curled around his backpack in the strange bed. Hazel lay beside him, staring at the ceiling as city sirens wailed in the distance. A small red light blinked steadily from the corner camera, a constant reminder that they were being watched, protected, contained. The room was the epitome of luxury, with sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent and a view that would have been spectacular if the blinds weren't sealed shut. Yet all she could think about was how quickly her world had shifted axis. This morning she'd been a widow, arranging her husband's wake. Now she was essentially a prisoner, albeit a willing one, in a crime lord's penthouse, implicated in financial crimes she hadn't committed, with her son's safety hanging by whatever thread of honor Dorian Hale possessed. The air conditioning hummed softly, and somewhere in the building she could hear the faint sounds of people moving, working, guarding. This was Dorian's world. Efficiency wrapped in luxury, danger masked by sophistication. She wondered how many other people lay awake in rooms like this, protected and trapped by the same power. Theo shifted in his sleep, mumbling something about Batman. Hazel brushed his hair back, her throat tight with emotion. For his sake, she would learn to navigate this new reality. She would untangle Ethan's mess, keep Theo safe, and somehow find a way through this maze of danger and obligation. The camera's red light continued its steady vigil as the city's nighttime symphony played on, a reminder that while they might be safe from Ruiz's threats, they were now firmly embedded in a stranger's carefully controlled domain. At precisely 9 o'clock, Hazel sat across from Dorian at a sleek marble conference table, the leather ledger and a slim manila file between them. Steam rose from 2 coffee cups, the rich aroma a stark contrast to the tension in the air. A third person, introduced as Marcus Chen, Dorian's head of cybersecurity, sat with a laptop at the ready. These are the primary accounts we've identified, Dorian said, opening the ledger. His fingers traced down columns of numbers that made Hazel's heart stutter. There, in black and white, were her maiden initials, HMR, Hazel Marie Reynolds. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles whitening. Those aren't my accounts. We know, Marcus said quietly. The signatures are forged, but they're good ones, would fool most banks. Dorian spread out several bank statements. Ethan moved money through these accounts for months. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers. The pattern suggests professional guidance. Subpoenas, Hazel said, the word tasting bitter. How soon? By the end of the week, likely sooner. The feds are already sniffing around Ruiz's operation. These accounts will lead them straight to you. Hazel took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. I need to see everything, raw statements, transfer records, all of it, and I need a laptop. Dorian's eyebrows lifted slightly. You have experience with this? I'm a bookkeeper. Numbers tell stories if you know how to read them. She met his gaze steadily. I won't sit here helplessly while other people decide my fate. A ghost of approval flickered across his face. He nodded to Marcus, who produced a secured laptop and began transferring files. For the next few hours, Hazel immersed herself in the data, barely touching her coffee. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, creating spreadsheets, tracking patterns. Around noon, Theo appeared with his math homework, settling quietly beside her with his worksheet. She was explaining fractions when he suddenly stiffened, his pencil clattering to the floor. A helicopter had passed close to the building, the sound triggering his anxiety. Without missing a beat, Hazel guided him through their breathing exercises, her voice soft and steady. When she looked up, she caught Dorian watching them, something shifting in his expression. The predatory stillness softened for just a moment. Theo, he said, Marcus mentioned you're working on a science project about rockets? The boy's face brightened slightly. Yeah, we're studying propulsion and gravity. I might know someone at the Aerospace Museum who could help. Dorian pulled out his phone, typing briefly. Would you like your project materials brought here? We can arrange secure delivery. Theo nodded eagerly, his earlier panic forgotten. Hazel felt something warm unfurl in her chest at the simple kindness. By early afternoon, she'd identified a pattern in the transfers. Every third Friday, money moved through her alleged accounts to a charitable foundation, the Quinn Family Heritage Fund, Marjorie's pet project. Look at this, she said, turning the laptop toward Dorian. The amounts vary, but the timing is consistent. And here, she pointed to a series of transactions. These matched deposits into the foundation's public records. Dorian leaned closer, his shoulder nearly touching hers. Money laundering, he said quietly. Clean funds mixed with dirty money, cycled through charitable donations. Marjorie's foundation, Hazel's voice was bitter. No wonder she was so quick to push us out. The day stretched on, punctuated by quiet conversations and the tap of keyboard keys. As evening fell, Hazel found herself in the kitchen, desperate for tea after hours of staring at screens. She reached for the kettle just as Dorian did the same, their hands brushing. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system. For a moment, neither moved, the charge between them almost visible in the dimming light. Then Dorian stepped back, allowing her to take the kettle first. Thank you, she said, the words carrying more weight than simple courtesy. For helping us understand what we're facing. He inclined his head slightly. You've handled it well. Most people would have broken down by now. I don't have that luxury. She filled the kettle, hyper-aware of his presence behind her. Theo needs me functioning. You're good with him, Dorian observed. The breathing exercises earlier, you've had practice. Since his father started staying out late, making excuses, Theo's always been sensitive to tension. She turned, leaning against the counter. He needs stability now, more than ever. Which is why you're staying. It wasn't quite a question. Yes. Hazel met his eyes. We'll need something in writing. Terms, boundaries, expectations. Of course, we can draft a protection agreement in the morning. He moved to the window, gazing out at the city lights blooming against the darkness. My lawyer will ensure your interests are represented. Hazel joined him at the window, their reflections overlapping in the glass. The plus-size widow and the dangerous man who'd become her unlikely shield. Neither spoke for a long moment, watching the city pulse below them, each aware they were choosing to trust someone who should have been an enemy. The night softened the hard edges of Dorian's face in the window's reflection, while the city lights caught the determined set of Hazel's jaw. Two people who'd started the day as reluctant allies, now standing in comfortable silence, not yet ready to acknowledge they were already on the same side. The morning sun streamed through bulletproof glass as Hazel signed her name for the 10th time. Legal documents covered the marble island where Theo sat, happily drowning chocolate chip pancakes in syrup. The breakfast scene felt almost normal if you ignored the armed guard by the elevator. Initial here, Marcus said, sliding another form forward. This covers the communication protocols. Hazel skimmed the document. One secured phone, no social media, all movements escorted and logged. Her hand hesitated over the paper. The restrictions are necessary, Dorian said from across the island, his voice low enough not to disturb Theo. Every digital footprint is a potential leak, she signed, the scratch of pen on paper loud in the quiet room. And school? Routes randomized daily, 2 teams, primary and backup. Dorian checked his watch. The driver's waiting. Theo hugged her tightly before leaving, his backpack bulging with fresh supplies. Hazel watched from the window as the black SUV merged into traffic, 2 other vehicles falling into formation. Less than 2 hours later, her secured phone buzzed. Dorian answered before the first ring ended. They're bringing him back, he said, tension threading through his usual calm. There was an attempt. The world tilted sideways. What happened? Is he unharmed? Our team intercepted. His voice hardened. Someone spoofed a district message, rerouted the bus. 2 of Ruiz's men were waiting at the side gate. Hazel pressed her hand against the cool window, watching for the SUV's return. When it finally pulled into the underground garage, she met them at the elevator. Theo burst out and into her arms, trembling slightly but trying to hide it. I knew something was wrong, he whispered. The bus went left instead of right. You did good, buddy, she smoothed his hair. Really good. Once Theo was settled with his tablet and a snack, Hazel cornered Dorian in his office. We can't stay here. He needs normal, school, friends, routine. Normal isn't an option right now. Dorian typed a code into the elevator panel, locking it down. He spread a map across his desk, pointing to marked locations. These are Ruiz's known operations: ports, warehouses, front businesses. His spotters work every major transit hub. Her throat tightened as she studied the web of red marks covering the city. How many? Enough to find you within an hour if you leave without protection. He met her eyes. This isn't just about the accounts anymore. Ruiz knows you're under my protection. Taking you or Theo would be a power play. Understanding hit like a physical blow. Her old life, grocery shopping, park visits, simple errands, was gone until this threat was neutralized. She sank into a chair, hands shaking slightly. What's the full protection plan? Dorian outlined it efficiently. Controlled communications, security escorts everywhere, direct access to intelligence briefings, no social media, no unplanned visitors, no deviation from secure protocols. I need your complete cooperation, he said. Half measures will get you killed. She nodded slowly, reality settling like a weight. Theo's safety comes first, whatever it takes. The day passed in a blur of security briefings and protocol reviews. By evening, Theo had fallen asleep surrounded by his homework, exhausted from the morning's excitement. Hazel carried him to bed, tucking him in with the stuffed dragon they'd retrieved from the Quinn house. She found Dorian on the balcony, his usual stillness more pronounced against the city's constant motion. The night air carried a hint of autumn chill. If we stay, she said quietly, I won't be treated like cargo. I need to understand what's happening, be part of the decisions. He turned to face her, expression unreadable in the dim light. You want partnership. Yes, complete honesty, even when it's ugly. I can't protect Theo if I'm kept in the dark. Something shifted in his stance, a subtle relaxation, as if she'd confirmed something he'd been waiting for. Agreed. You'll have access to everything I know about Ruiz, the accounts, all of it. And my input matters, she pressed. Not just about Theo, but strategy too. I found the money laundering pattern today. I can help. You've already proved your value. His voice carried unexpected warmth. Partnership and truth, Hazel. You have my word. She studied him for a moment, weighing his promise against her instincts. The predator was still there in his bearing, his controlled movements, but something else too. A willingness to share power that felt genuine. Thank you, she said finally, turning toward the balcony door. Tomorrow would start early. She needed rest while she could get it. Inside, she set her alarm for 6 a.m., determined to face whatever came next. Her old life was gone, but she refused to mourn it. Forward was the only direction left. Dorian remained on the balcony, a dark silhouette against the city lights. For a moment, Hazel wondered what he saw in the urban sprawl below. Threats, opportunities, or something else entirely. Then she pushed the thought aside, focusing on her immediate tasks. Check the locks, review tomorrow's schedule, memorize the new security codes. She wouldn't waste energy looking back. What mattered was ahead, keeping Theo safe, untangling the financial mess, and navigating this strange new partnership with a dangerous man who'd become their unexpected protector. Dawn crept over the city as Hazel mapped out their new life on a notepad. Structure would help Theo cope. He needed anchors in this strange new world. By 6:30, she had a schedule that would give him stability while keeping them both safe. At 7 sharp, they gathered in the kitchen where the chef had laid out fresh fruit, yogurt, and whole grain toast. Theo's fingers drummed against his water glass until Hazel placed her hand over his. Same time every day, buddy, she promised. Breakfast at 7, always. Dorian entered silently, nodding approval at the routine already taking shape. He settled at the far end of the island, watching them with that predator's patience as his security chief delivered the morning briefing. At 8, Theo connected with his teacher via secure video link. His shoulders relaxed when Mrs. Chen appeared, familiar and smiling, reviewing his assignments as if nothing had changed. Hazel caught Dorian, watching her son's tension ease. House rules, Dorian announced once Theo was absorbed in his schoolwork. He laid out a document detailing movement restrictions, communication protocols, and security measures. Hazel read carefully, then looked up. I have terms of my own. His eyebrow lifted slightly. Go on. I keep my remote bookkeeping client. It's legitimate income and gives me purpose. Theo's bedtime routine stays mine completely. And if you want cooperation with security protocols, you eat dinner with us at 7. She met his gaze steadily. Every night you're here. We're not prisoners or pets to be fed and housed. Something like respect flickered in his eyes, Agreed. With conditions. Your client communications go through our secure channels. I get daily briefings on Theo's schedule, and dinner includes security updates. Deal. The word hung between them, weighted with more than just logistics. By 9, Hazel was deep in ledger work, cross-referencing transactions while Theo did math nearby. The familiar rhythm of numbers helped settle her nerves. She caught Dorian watching them both from his office doorway, his usual intensity softened by something she couldn't quite name. Midday brought another ritual, stretching breaks to keep Theo from getting fidgety. Hazel led him through simple yoga poses she'd learned in physical therapy, modified for his height. When he wobbled in tree pose, giggling, she heard a low chuckle from Dorian's direction. The afternoon sun found Hazel in the rooftop greenhouse, with Marco, one of the security team. She traced her fingers over herb leaves, naming them aloud. Basil, thyme, rosemary. The familiar scents centered her, a small piece of normal in this surreal new existence. The mint's particularly fresh, Marco offered, clearly trying to help her feel at ease. Chef uses it in the evening tea. Later, as she reviewed account statements in the library, Dorian appeared with a sprig of chocolate mint. You mentioned liking it, he said simply, setting it beside her. Laptop. She blinked, surprised he'd noticed that detail during her greenhouse inventory. The day's rhythm continued. Theo's afternoon lessons, security check-ins, preparation for dinner. At 7, Dorian joined them, as agreed, his presence both commanding and carefully measured. He ate last, she noticed, watching them take their first bites before touching his own plate. When Theo asked about the solar system project due next week, Dorian's voice dropped to a gentler register, explaining orbital patterns with unexpected patience. As evening settled over the penthouse, Hazel shivered before their scheduled elevator trip to check the lower security office. Dorian stepped close, too close for comfort usually, but his movements were slow, deliberate. His fingers found her coat buttons, doing them up one by one. His knuckles brushed her throat, sending her pulse skittering, but he paused, waiting. She nodded once, giving permission to continue rather than stepping back. The moment stretched, charged with something neither of them was ready to name. Thank you, she murmured when he finished, the words carrying more weight than the simple courtesy warranted. The night wound down with their final ritual, Theo's bedtime story. Hazel sat beside him, reading about dragons and knights while he snuggled into his pillows. Beyond the door, she caught Dorian's shadow pausing, listening. After a moment, he moved on, but the door stayed ajar as she'd requested on that first night, letting in a slice of hallway light that helped Theo sleep. Theo's breathing evened out as she finished the chapter. Mom, he whispered, already half asleep. Is this home now? She smoothed his hair, choosing her words carefully. Home is wherever we're together, baby. We're safe here. Mr. Dorian keeps the bad guys away, he mumbled. Like the knights in the story. Hazel kissed his forehead, not correcting the comparison, though she knew Dorian was far from a fairy tale knight. Yet watching him adjust his deadly world to accommodate her child's needs, she had to admit he was something equally complex, a protector whose methods she might not always approve of, but whose commitment she was starting to trust. Outside Theo's room, the penthouse settled into night rhythms. Security cameras whirred, climate controls hummed, and somewhere beyond the reinforced walls, the city continued its chaotic dance. But here, in their new sanctuary, order emerged from chaos. Each scheduled hour, each shared meal, each small ritual became another thread, binding them together in this strange new life. Hazel returned to the kitchen for a final cup of tea, finding the chocolate mint sprig now in a small glass of water. The sight made her smile despite herself. Even predators, it seemed, could learn the language of simple kindnesses. The next morning shattered their careful routine like glass. Hazel was reviewing accounts when Marco burst through the office door, face tight with tension. Security! Breach, he announced. Mr. Hale needs you in the control room. Hazel's heart stuttered as she followed him down the reinforced corridor. Through the security feeds, she watched as Dorian's men wrestled a struggling figure into the building's secure holding area. The man wore civilian clothes, but his build and movement screamed professional training. Found him trying to plant this, Dorian said quietly, holding up what looked like a simple delivery sticker. GPS tracker, military grade. Hazel's hands trembled. Ruiz? Yes. Dorian's voice held Arctic temperatures. I need you to observe the interview, behind the glass. Interview. Such a civilized word for what was about to happen. Hazel nodded, throat dry. The interrogation room was stark. Steel table, 2 chairs, harsh lighting. Dorian entered with precise movements, no wasted energy. No weapons visible, but his presence alone filled the space with controlled menace. "Name," he commanded. The runner spat on the floor. What followed wasn't the theatrical violence Hazel had expected from movies. Instead, Dorian worked with surgical precision, each movement calculated for maximum effect with minimum drama. No shouting, no grandstanding, just the quiet expertise of someone who'd learned exactly how much pressure to apply and where. Hazel watched, trembling, as the runner's resistance crumbled under Dorian's methodical assault. Her stomach churned, but she forced herself to keep watching. This was her reality now. "The uniform was ready," the runner finally gasped. "Fire drill, next week, swap out your guy, grab the kid during evacuation, clean exit." Hazel's knees buckled. Marco steadied her with a careful hand on her elbow. "Details," Dorian said, voice unchanged. "All of them." By the time it was over, they had names, dates, the full extraction plan. Dorian washed his hands meticulously in the adjacent bathroom. Movements as precise as they'd been during the interrogation. His knuckles weren't even bruised. When they returned upstairs, Hazel noticed Theo's science project box had fallen from the counter, spilling pipe cleaners and cardboard across the floor. Before she could move, Dorian knelt and began gathering the materials. His hands, so brutal minutes ago, now carefully straightened a bent wire for the solar system model. "Saturn's ring was crooked," he said quietly, replacing the box on the counter. Hazel watched him, trying to reconcile these two versions of him, the efficient interrogator and the man who remembered which planet her son was building. The day crawled forward. Security protocols tightened further. Dinner arrived on schedule, Dorian taking his usual place across from them. He ate last, as always, but his eyes tracked every movement in the room with heightened intensity. After Theo went to bed, Hazel found herself on the balcony, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. The city sparkled below, deceptively peaceful. She heard Dorian's approach before he appeared, beside her, holding his own steaming cup. "I should have warned you about the observation requirement," he said after a moment. "No, I needed to see." Hazel took a steadying breath. "But I need to set some boundaries." Dorian turned to face her, giving her his full attention. "During sleep," she continued. "No sudden contact. Theo has nightmares sometimes, and I need to be able to reach him without—" She gestured vaguely at the security measures surrounding them. "Understood." His voice held an undertone she hadn't heard before. "I react poorly to unexpected touch in the dark. Old training, old scars. But your voice I trust. If you need to move at night, just speak first." The admission seemed to cost him something. Hazel nodded, accepting this piece of truth between them. "Thank you for fixing the science project," she said softly. "Kids need constants," he replied, "especially now." They finished their tea in companionable silence, the city humming below. When Hazel heard Theo's muffled whimper through the baby monitor, she still kept nearby. She set her cup down. "Want to learn something useful?" she asked Dorian. He followed her to Theo's room, staying in the doorway as she sat on the bed's edge. Theo's face was scrunched in distress, caught in some dream shadow. "Baby," she called softly. "Let's breathe together, okay?" Theo's eyes fluttered open, finding her face in the dim light. "Remember our special breathing?" she demonstrated, exaggerating the movement. "In through your nose, like smelling cookies. Out through your mouth, like cooling soup." Theo copied her, his breathing gradually steadying. From the doorway, Hazel heard Dorian's breath unconsciously matching their rhythm. "Good job," she praised, smoothing Theo's hair. "Want to teach Mr. Dorian our trick?" Theo nodded, sleep already reclaiming him. "It's good for scary times," he mumbled. "That it is, baby, that it is." She tucked the blanket around him and moved to the door. Dorian stood frozen, something raw in his expression, as he watched this simple ritual of comfort. His fingers traced the doorframe once before dropping to his side. "Cookie breathing," he said quietly, the words sounding strange in his mouth. "Works for grown-ups too," Hazel offered. He nodded, still watching Theo's peaceful face. For a moment, Hazel glimpsed something beneath his carefully maintained control, a longing for this kind of gentle connection, this easy trust, but he didn't seem to know how to accept it, or believe he deserved it. The moment stretched, delicate as spider silk, before Dorian straightened and resumed his usual stance. But he left the door ajar, exactly as Hazel preferred, the hall light making a path through the darkness. Morning light spilled across spreadsheets as Hazel's fingers flew over the keyboard. Numbers told stories if you knew how to read them, and this one was revealing its secrets hour by hour. Coffee grew cold beside her as she traced the twisted paths of Ethan's. Betrayal. By noon, her neck ached from hunching over the screen, but triumph sparked in her chest. "There you are," she whispered, highlighting a recurring pattern. Every third Tuesday, funds cycled through a series of accounts before landing in an offshore holding pattern, all connected to Marjorie's upcoming charity gala. She pressed her palms against her eyes, thinking. The gala was this weekend, barely 4 days away. If she was right about the timing. "I need to speak with Dorian," she told the guard at her door. "It's about the accounts." 20 minutes later, she stood in Dorian's office, facing not just him, but 3 of his lieutenants. Their skepticism was palpable as she projected her findings onto the wall screen. "Here's the choke point," she explained, voice steady despite her racing heart. "Every transfer passes through this corridor before reaching its final destination. If we time it right, we can lock Ruiz's liquidity for 72 hours. "That's ambitious," one lieutenant commented, arms crossed. "It's sound," Hazel countered, pulling up supporting data. "Look at the authentication patterns. The system requires donor-side verification at specific intervals. Miss one, and everything freezes for review." Dorian leaned forward, eyes intent on the screen. "Walk us through it again." For the next hour, Hazel defended her analysis against increasingly specific questions. She adjusted thresholds, strengthened fail-safes, and refused to back down when challenged. These men might know violence, but numbers were her territory. "There's more," she said finally, pulling up a new document. Her finger traced a familiar signature. Marjorie Quinn's name, right next to a laundering authorization. Either she knew and helped, or she deliberately looked away, probably to ensure I couldn't claim any inheritance when things went wrong. The room went quiet. Dorian's expression hardened for a moment before smoothing back to neutrality. "The gala is her crown jewel event," Hazel continued. "I should be there. My presence alone will force certain authentications that could trigger the lockdown we need." "It's exposed," one lieutenant warned. "Ruiz will have people there." "Exactly why it's perfect," Hazel argued. "He won't expect us to be that bold." Dorian studied her for a long moment. "You understand the risks?" "I understand staying hidden isn't solving anything." He nodded once. "Done. We'll work out the details tomorrow." Back in her suite, Hazel opened her closet and pulled out a dress she'd bought months ago but never worn. The deep burgundy fabric draped elegantly, highlighting curves she'd been taught to hide. The neckline was modest but flattering, the length classic. She'd returned it twice before finally keeping it, never quite brave enough to wear it to Marjorie's society functions. Standing before the mirror now, she slipped it on. The woman who looked back at her wasn't hiding anymore. This dress wasn't about anyone else's. Approval. It was armor, it was intention, it was choosing to be seen on her own terms. A shadow in the doorway made her turn. Dorian stood frozen, one hand on the frame. His eyes traveled the length of her slowly, appreciation evident but contained. He didn't move closer, didn't reach out. "Perfect," he said simply, voice low and rough. Heat bloomed in her cheeks, but she held his gaze. "Think it will scandalize the donor class?" "Thoroughly." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Good." Running footsteps broke the moment. Theo burst in, proudly holding up a tie. "Mr. Dorian, I practiced like you showed me." Dorian crouched down to Theo's level, offering his sleeve. "Show me?" Theo's tongue poked out in concentration as he wrapped the silk around Dorian's wrist. The knot that resulted was crooked and loose, nothing like the precise Windsor Dorian typically wore. "Sorry," Theo mumbled. "I messed it up." "No." Dorian's voice was firm but gentle. "This is exactly right. In fact, I promised to wear it exactly like this at the gala. A perfect knot from my favorite teacher." Theo beamed, previous disappointment forgotten. "Really?" "All night." "All night," Dorian confirmed. "I keep my promises." Hazel watched them, something warm and dangerous unfurling in her chest. This man, who could break bones without blinking, was letting her son practice uneven knots on his $1,000 ties. The same hands that had extracted information hours ago were now carefully adjusting the fabric so it wouldn't slip off his wrist. "Mom," Theo turned to her excitedly, "you look like a queen. Can I practice my bow for when I have to dance with you?" "Of course, baby." She held out her hand with exaggerated formality, and Theo took it, giggling as he attempted a courtly bow. Over his head, her eyes met Dorian's. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. He was watching them like they were something precious and rare, something he wanted to memorize. For a moment, the careful distance he maintained seemed to waver. Then Theo's stomach growled loudly, breaking the spell. "Dinner time," Hazel announced, smoothing her dress. "I should change." "Leave it on," Dorian suggested quietly. "Get comfortable in it. You'll need to move naturally at the gala." She nodded, understanding the tactical wisdom even as part of her thrilled at the thought of sitting across from him in this dress for an entire meal. Practical as always. Usually. His eyes lingered on the crooked knot adorning his sleeve. Usually practical. 2 days of meticulous preparation had led to this moment. Hazel stood before the gala venue's gleaming doors, her burgundy dress catching the golden light as she smoothed a nervous hand down the silken fabric that hugged her curves. Last night had been security briefings and signal practice until her head spun with codes and contingencies, Dorian drilling her on emergency exits until she could recite them in her sleep. Tonight was showtime. Dorian's hand settled at the small of her back, steady and warm through the thin material of her dress. His touch anchored her to the present, a silent reminder that she wasn't walking into the lion's den alone. "Ready?" His voice was low, meant only for her ears, his breath stirring the loose tendrils of hair that framed her face. She nodded, drawing strength from his solid presence as he guided her into the chandelier-lit ballroom. Camera flashes sparkled off crystal and silk as they made their entrance, the bright lights momentarily blinding. Hazel felt the weight of every stare like physical pressure against her skin, heard the whispers ripple through the crowd like waves against a shore. The plus-size widow on Dorian Hale's arm, scandalous, inappropriate, too soon after Ethan's death. But she wasn't here for their approval or to satisfy their gossip. She moved with purpose, chin lifted slightly, Dorian matching her stride for stride, his hand never leaving her back. "Mrs. Whitmore," Hazel greeted one of the major donors, her smile genuine despite the butterflies in her stomach. The elderly woman had always been kind to her, even before she'd married Ethan. "That necklace is stunning. Is it Victorian? The craftsmanship is remarkable." As the elderly woman preened, delighted at having her jewelry noticed, Hazel caught Dorian's subtle head tilt, his signal that his team was spreading through the room, mapping exits and marking faces. Nico had slipped in through the kitchen, Carlos was monitoring the security feeds, and Marco was stationed near the main exit. "And you must tell me about your latest charity initiative," Hazel continued smoothly, drawing Mrs. Whitmore into comfortable conversation while keeping track of the moving pieces around them. Her peripheral vision caught Marjorie across the room, holding court with several board members, pointedly ignoring Hazel's presence. "Hazel," Paige's voice cut through the pleasant chatter, sharp as a blade and just as dangerous. "How brave of you to come tonight." Hazel turned, maintaining her smile, though it no longer reached her eyes. Paige stood in designer black that probably cost more than Hazel's monthly rent. Perfectly coiffed hair, gleaming under the chandelier light and radiating venom from every pore. "The donors are whispering, you know," Paige continued softly, leaning in with mock intimacy, her perfume cloying and too sweet. "About how quickly you moved on, about what kind of arrangement you must have with Mr. Hale to earn his protection. Some are wondering if it started before Ethan's accident." "Is that so?" Hazel kept her voice light, refusing to give Paige the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. "How fascinating that they have nothing better to discuss than invented scandals. I'd have thought a charity event would focus on, well, charity." She felt Dorian materialize at her shoulder, his presence a clear warning. His face remained neutral, but there was a coldness in his eyes that made the hair on Hazel's arms stand on end. Paige's smile faltered, her confidence visibly wavering under his steady gaze. "Enjoying the evening?" Dorian asked, his tone carrying an edge that made Paige step back involuntarily. His hand curled possessively around Hazel's waist, not painful, but undeniably territorial. "Just catching up," Paige muttered, eyes darting between them before she retreated into the crowd, shoulders tight with thwarted malice. Hazel checked her phone. 9:45 p.m. Time to execute the next phase of their plan. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she opened the secure messaging app. She typed the agreed-upon phrase with steady fingers, despite her nerves. "The roses are lovely tonight." Within minutes, their tech chief confirmed with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Ruiz's financial corridor was frozen, and the system was flagging suspicious donor patterns that led straight to Marjorie's pet foundation. Years of money laundering were being exposed, invisible to the glittering crowd but devastating to those who had thought themselves untouchable. "Dance with me," Dorian murmured against her ear, his breath warm and intimate as he led her to the floor. The small orchestra played something slow and classical as their plan unfolded invisibly around them. His hand settled on her waist, proper but intimate, the heat of his palm burning through the fabric. They moved together with practiced ease, maintaining their cover while digital chaos spread through certain banking channels. Hazel could almost picture the frantic text messages flying between Marjorie and her financial advisors, the slow dawning panic. "You're trembling," he noted quietly, his eyes never leaving her face as they turned in a slow circle. "Adrenaline," she admitted, meeting his gaze. "Is it done? Did it work?" "Yes, you did it." His thumb traced a small circle on her back, a gesture so intimate it made her breath catch. "We can leave soon, just a few more minutes to avoid suspicion." The drive home was electric with unspoken tension. Hazel's skin hummed with awareness of him beside her, his profile sharp in the passing streetlights, their feigned intimacy of the evening bleeding into something raw and real that neither seemed ready to acknowledge. The car felt too small, too close, every breath shared. In the penthouse elevator, Dorian's control cracked first, the careful distance he'd maintained suddenly impossible. "Hazel!" His voice was rough, almost pained. "I need—" "Yes," she breathed, turning to him, the word hanging between them like a lifeline. "Please." He pressed her against the wall, his body solid against hers, but his touch remained gentle, reverent. "Tell me to stop, and I will, immediately." His eyes searched hers, seeking confirmation that this wasn't just adrenaline or gratitude. "I trust you," she whispered, and meant it with a certainty that should have frightened her. Her hands came up to frame his face, feeling the slight rasp of stubble against her palms. Their first kiss was tender, almost reverent, a testing of waters. The second was hungry, months of tension finally breaking like a dam. They barely made it to his bedroom, leaving a trail of shoes and his jacket behind, hands exploring with growing urgency. Dorian worshipped her body with the same intensity he brought to everything else, but there was no trace of his daytime violence here. Every touch was a question, every kiss asked permission. He traced the curves of her body with hands that had ended lives but now trembled with restraint. When he finally entered her, it was with breathless care, watching her face for any sign of discomfort or hesitation. Hazel pulled him closer, wanting his weight, his heat, the solid reality of him. "I'm not fragile," she whispered against his mouth. "No," he agreed roughly, his fingers tangling in her hair. "You're magnificent." They moved together with increasing urgency, finding a rhythm that built and built until Hazel shattered first, his name a broken sound on her lips. Dorian followed moments later, his control finally abandoned as he buried his face against her neck, whispering her name like a prayer. After, lying in the peaceful quiet of his bedroom, Hazel traced patterns on his chest, following the lines of scars whose story she didn't yet know. "Look at this." She reached down to her discarded dress, showing him a tiny stitch in the hem that didn't match the others. "A tracker. My addition to the security plan. I had it sewn in yesterday just in case we got separated." Dorian's eyes softened, the usual sharp calculation replaced by something warm and tender. "You never cease to surprise me. Good surprises, I hope." She smiled up at him, feeling strangely shy despite their intimacy. He gathered her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple, his arms strong and secure around her. "The best kind." They settled facing each other, hands linked between them on the pillow. Hazel studied his face in the dim light, the usual sharp edges softened by contentment, the vigilance momentarily set aside. She felt safer than she had in months, maybe years, the constant tension in her shoulders finally easing. "Sleep," he murmured, thumb stroking the delicate skin of her wrist where her pulse beat steadily. "I've got you. Nothing gets past me tonight." Hazel closed her eyes, letting exhaustion pull her under, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges, but willing for now to simply exist in this moment of peace. Their last conscious movements were drawing closer, her head tucking under his chin, sharing warmth and trust in equal measure as the city hummed peacefully beyond their windows, unaware of how the balance of power had shifted within its dark heart. Sunlight spilled through the penthouse windows as Hazel padded into the kitchen, drawn by the scent of fresh coffee. Dorian was already there, shirt sleeves rolled up, scanning reports on his tablet. "Morning," she murmured, accepting the mug he handed her. Their fingers brushed, a reminder of last night's intimacy. The calm shattered at 8:47 a.m. Alarms blared through the building's speakers, and Dorian's phone lit up with multiple alerts. "Bomb threat, main lobby," he said tersely. Evacuation Protocol Alpha. Security teams materialized from various posts. One swept Theo's backpack into a clear bag, while another helped him into his jacket. Hazel grabbed their emergency kit, a routine they'd practiced but never used. "Remember the steps, buddy?" Hazel asked Theo, keeping her voice steady. He nodded, clutching his science notebook. They moved in formation through the service corridor, following predetermined paths. Other residents filed out through main routes, while Dorian's team maintained a protective bubble around them. At the third-floor landing, a guard in standard uniform stepped forward. "Mrs. Quinn, alternative route's been cleared. This way." Something felt off. Hazel scanned the man's credentials. Everything looked regulation except... Theo suddenly jerked back. "Mom, his badge is wrong!" The guard lunged for Theo, but the boy was already moving, darting behind a pillar. Through the stairwell window, Hazel spotted a white maintenance van idling below. Pure instinct drove her forward. She threw herself against the van's sliding door just as the false guard reached for the handle. "Dorian!" Her voice echoed off concrete. The response was instant. Guards converged from all directions as Dorian vaulted the last flight of stairs. His expression turned lethal when he saw the scene. The imposter reached for a concealed weapon, but Dorian was faster. In 3 precise movements, he had the man disarmed and pinned. "Sweep the building," he ordered. "Full protocol, now!" Teams deployed while others secured the perimeter. The bomb threat had been a diversion, sophisticated enough to trigger evacuation but designed to create controlled chaos. "You okay?" Dorian asked softly, checking Hazel and Theo for injuries. His hands trembled slightly as they brushed her shoulders. "We're okay," Hazel assured him, holding Theo close. He spotted the badge irregularity before I did. Pride flickered across Dorian's face as he knelt to Theo's level. "Quick thinking, buddy. What gave it away?" "The color was wrong," Theo explained, still shaking but steady. "Real ones have a blue stripe, not purple." By noon, they were back in the penthouse's secure floor, processing the morning's events. Forensics reports scrolled across screens as analysts traced the breach. "Sir." Dorian's tech chief appeared with a tablet. "We've confirmed the source. The evacuation timing came from inside the Quinn estate." Hazel's coffee went cold as she absorbed the implications. Someone in Ethan's family had helped orchestrate her son's attempted kidnapping. Hours crawled by with increased security sweeps and tightened protocols. Theo stayed close, working on homework at the kitchen island while guards rotated, positions outside. Early evening found Hazel in Dorian's office, reviewing camera feeds. He stood at the window, tension radiating from his shoulders. "Hazel." His voice was raw when he finally turned. "If anything had happened to either of you today..." She crossed to him, reading the barely contained violence in his stance. But it didn't. "You don't understand." His hands fisted at his sides. "If I lost you, lost Theo, I would burn this city to ash. Every contact, every favor, every resource I have would be deployed for vengeance." "Hey," she touched his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I'm not some helpless package you're protecting. I'm your partner. We face this together." The rigid line of his jaw softened slightly. "Partner," he repeated, like he was testing the word. "Partner," she confirmed, "which means you don't carry this alone." They spent the next hour upgrading security. New protocols, additional cameras, enhanced verification systems. Every entrance point was double-checked, every guard's credentials re-verified. "The overnight team is in place," Dorian reported as darkness fell. "Motion sensors active, thermal imaging online." Hazel nodded, watching Theo arrange his sleeping space. They'd decided to leave all interior doors open, creating clear sightlines between rooms. His bed was positioned to see both their doorway and the main living space. "Got everything you need, sweetie?" Hazel asked, tucking his favorite blanket around him. "Uh-huh," Theo yawned. "Is Dorian staying up?" "I'll be right here," Dorian assured him, his voice gentler than Hazel had ever heard it. They waited until Theo's breathing evened out into sleep. Dorian moved to the window, phone in hand. Hazel could see draft messages to his various lieutenants, orders that would launch an all-out offensive against their enemies. But he didn't send them. Instead, he looked at Hazel, then at Theo's sleeping form, and slowly set the phone aside. His war could wait. They had built something precious here, a fragile peace, a growing trust, a family taking shape in the spaces between danger. Hazel stepped close, resting her head against his shoulder. His arm came around her automatically, protective and possessive all at once. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For choosing us over vengeance? For being the man I trust with my son's safety? for letting me be strong instead of just protected." His hold tightened fractionally. They stood together, watching the city lights glitter beyond the bulletproof glass, while alarms blinked silently and guards patrolled below. In the quiet, they could hear Theo's soft breathing from the next room, the sound that kept Dorian's darker impulses in check, the reminder of what they were fighting to preserve. Dawn painted the penthouse windows in pale gold when Dorian initiated the move. 30 minutes, he announced, already reviewing evacuation protocols on his tablet. Essential items only. Hazel guided Theo through packing his backpack, favorite books, science notebook, the stuffed dinosaur he'd had since kindergarten. She worked efficiently, rolling clothes into tight bundles while keeping her voice steady for Theo's sake. "Like a secret mission?" Theo whispered, clutching his backpack straps. "Exactly like that." She managed a smile. "We're going somewhere extra safe." Dorian's team moved with practiced precision. Hard drives were wiped, laptops encrypted and sealed in protective cases. Security feeds switched to remote monitoring as cameras powered down in sequence. The garage level hummed with controlled tension. 2 armored SUVs idled, dark windows reflecting the overhead lights. Hazel noticed how Dorian's people positioned themselves, a seamless barrier between potential threats and their principles. "You're with me in the second vehicle," Marcus, Dorian's most trusted driver, told Hazel. "Mr. Hale leads in the first." Theo pressed close to Hazel's side as they settled into the SUV's leather interior. Through the bulletproof glass, she watched Dorian conduct final checks, testing comms, confirming routes, his movements precise and controlled. The convoy moved smoothly through morning traffic, taking indirect paths that seemed random but followed a careful logic. Theo tracked their progress on his tablet's map, marking when they turned east toward the coast. After 90 minutes, they curved onto a private road that wound up through dense pine forest. The trees parted to reveal Dorian's safe house, a masterpiece of steel and glass rising from basalt cliffs above the churning Pacific. "Wow," Theo breathed, face pressed to the window. The house was a fortress disguised as modern architecture. Retinal scanners guarded entry points. Bulletproof glass caught the morning light. Below the elegant surface lay reinforced walls and emergency systems. Dorian led them through comprehensive security checks before allowing full access. He showed Hazel the pantry first, shelves stocked with their preferred brands, Theo's favorite cereals, fresh produce in climate-controlled drawers. "The panic room," he said next, leading them down to a reinforced chamber. Independent ventilation, satellite communications, enough supplies for 2 weeks. He demonstrated the locking mechanisms, made them practice the entry sequence. Hazel noted how he kept himself between them and the exits, how his attention never fully left the perimeter cameras. The tension broke 2 hours later in the planning room. Dorian was reviewing intelligence reports when Hazel entered. "This area is restricted," he said without looking up. "Like hell it is." Hazel planted herself by the tactical display. "I need to see what you're seeing." "It's safer if you—" "If I what? Stay ignorant. These decisions affect our lives, Dorian. I won't be sidelined." His jaw tightened. "This isn't a debate." "You're right, it's not. Either we're partners or we're not. Choose." "I'm trying to protect you." "By keeping me blind, that's not protection, that's control." They were too focused on their argument to notice Theo in the doorway until his small voice cut through. "Are you fighting because of me?" The anger drained from both adults instantly. Hazel reached for him. "No, sweetie, we're just figuring things out." "Come here, buddy." Dorian's voice gentled as he pulled up a chair. "We shouldn't have raised our voices. That's our fault, not yours." Later, after Theo was settled with his books, they found each other in the kitchen. The sunset painted the ocean copper through the windows. "I'm sorry," Dorian said quietly. "Fear makes me harsh, controlling." "I know." Hazel touched his arm. "And I'm sorry too. When I care about someone, I get reckless, push too hard." "We need rules," he said. "Real ones that we both follow." They drafted terms at the kitchen island, full information sharing, joint risk assessment, no unilateral decisions about security. Most importantly, absolute transparency about anything affecting Theo's safety. "Partners," Hazel said firmly. "Equal ones." Dorian nodded, tension easing from his shoulders. "Partners." They spent the evening in the planning room together, analyzing data. Hazel tracked financial patterns through Marjorie's donor network while Dorian mapped Paige's recent travel. Too many trips to border cities, too many gaps in her credit card trail. "Look at this," Hazel said, highlighting a sequence. These donations cycle through the same shell companies Ruiz uses. Dorian leaned close, studying the pattern. Good catch. We'll flag those accounts for monitoring. They worked until exhaustion set in, the tactical displays casting blue light across their faces. The house systems hummed quietly. Waves crashed against the cliffs below, and Theo's peaceful breathing drifted from his room. In their bedroom, they settled into a new arrangement, backs touching but hands linked between pillows. It was a deliberate choice, maintaining connection while respecting each other's need for space. Thank you, Hazel murmured into the darkness. For what? For choosing partnership over control. His fingers tightened around hers. Thank you for demanding nothing less. They drifted off to the sound of the ocean, their clasped hands a promise between them. The house's defenses stood guard, but their strongest protection was this: truth shared, power balanced, trust chosen, despite fear. Hazel stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the tiny microphone nestled beneath her collar. Her hands were steady, but her pulse raced. The morning sun streamed through the safe house windows, catching on the tracking device secured in her watch band. Run it again, Dorian said, leaning against the doorframe. His casual pose betrayed nothing of the tension radiating from him. I text Marjorie about probate discussions. Hazel met his eyes in the mirror. We meet at Café Laurent at 3. I present the evidence of the shell accounts. If Paige appears, I use the phrase, we should discuss this privately, to signal I'm following her. The team tracks my location. And if anything feels wrong, such a lovely day for coffee means abort. She turned to face him. I know the signals, Dorian. We've practiced this. He crossed the room in 3 strides, hands coming to rest on her shoulders. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. We need proof of who's working with Ruiz. She covered his hand with hers. Trust me to play my part. The morning crawled by in careful preparation. They reviewed contingencies while Theo worked on his science project in the secured playroom, happily unaware of the afternoon stakes. Hazel's phone chimed at 10:30. Marjorie agreeing to meet. At 2 o'clock, Hazel kissed Theo's forehead. Be good for Sarah, she said, referring to his trusted tutor. I'll be back for dinner. The drive into the city felt endless. Hazel watched familiar landmarks slide past, reminding herself to breathe. The cafe came into view, an elegant establishment with discreet booths and thick curtains. Perfect for private conversations, perfect for traps. Marjorie was already seated, immaculate as always in pearls and pale silk. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Darling, how unexpected. Hazel slid into the booth, placing her folder on the table. Thank you for meeting me. I've found some concerning discrepancies in Ethan's accounts. She laid out the documents one by one. Transfer records, shell company registrations, charity donation logs. Marjorie's face remained carefully blank, but her fingers tightened around her teacup. These accounts were opened in my name, Hazel continued, but the signatures are forged. The routing matches known laundering patterns through your foundation's gala circuit. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable... The thing is, Hazel cut in, I thought you were behind it. The timing, the social connections, the charity angle, it all pointed to you. She leaned forward. But then I noticed something interesting. The initial code theft. It happened during your Mediterranean cruise, when you were documented in photos at every port. A soft laugh came from behind her. Well spotted. Hazel turned slowly. Paige stood there, elegant in a cream suit, smile sharp as a blade. Though I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish by sharing these theories. They're not theories, Hazel kept her voice steady. You sold access codes to Ruiz. You set up accounts in my name to take the fall. Prove it. Paige slid into the booth. Better yet, let's discuss this somewhere more private. After all, we should talk about Theo's future custody arrangements. The threat hung in the air, clear as crystal. Hazel's heart pounded, but she maintained her calm. We should discuss this privately. The code phrase sent, she gathered her papers and stood. Paige's hand closed around her arm, perfectly manicured nails digging in slightly. They walked to a waiting town car, Marjorie forgotten behind them. The warehouse district materialized after 20 minutes of silence. Salt air and machine oil filled Hazel's lungs as Paige led her through a metal door. The space inside was vast, shadowy, filled with shipping containers and the echo of distant waves. Ignacio Ruiz waited by a steel desk, his expensive suit incongruous against the industrial backdrop. Mrs. Quinn, how kind of you to join us. The pleasure's all yours, I'm sure. Hazel's dry tone earned her a sharp push from Paige. Spirited, Ruiz smiled. Good. That will make tonight's exchange more interesting. Dorian's territory for your safety. And your son's, of course. Hazel allowed herself to be secured to a chair, mind racing behind a mask of fear. The frozen corridor, she said. I could help with that. Oh? Ruiz raised an eyebrow. I found the trigger points. I can thaw your funds if you guarantee Theo and I walk free. Interesting proposal, he checked his watch. We have until midnight to consider it. Hazel's pulse thundered in her ears, but she forced herself to keep talking, to keep him engaged. Every minute bought was another minute closer to the plan's completion. She was aware of the GPS signal steadily transmitting her location, of Dorian's icon moving on digital maps miles away. The warehouse creaked and settled around them. Somewhere, a chain clinked against metal. Paige paced like a caged cat while Ruiz made calls in rapid Spanish. Hazel tested her restraint subtly, counting her breaths, watching the shadows lengthen. She thought of Theo, safe at the house, of Dorian's promise to protect them both. The ropes bit into her wrists as she shifted, her watch face catching the dim light. The tiny red tracker light blinked steadily, a reminder that she wasn't truly alone. Through a high window, she could see the sky darkening toward evening. Midnight approached with inexorable patience, each tick of Ruiz's watch marking another moment closer to whatever end awaited. Hazel kept her breathing even, her expression controlled, while her heart hammered against her ribs. Miles away, a GPS dot moved purposefully across a glowing screen. Darkness swallowed the warehouse district as midnight approached. One by one, streetlights flickered and died, plunging whole blocks into shadow. At the port, loading cranes ground to a halt, their operators puzzled by system failures. Traffic snarled as key intersections suddenly required emergency maintenance, forcing vehicles into deliberate gridlock. Inside the warehouse, Hazel felt the subtle shift. The overhead lights dimmed, then stabilized, running on backup power. Ruiz barked orders into his phone, growing increasingly agitated as reports of communications disruptions flooded in. Something's wrong with the networks, one of his men reported, checking his devices. Signals are dead in sections. Ruiz's face hardened. Check the perimeter, now! Hazel kept her expression neutral, though her heart raced. She knew what this meant. The tiny tracker sewn into her dress hem was broadcasting her location with perfect clarity to the one system still functioning. The first shots came from high and distant, precise cracks that dropped two guards by the loading bay doors. Before their bodies hit the ground, smoke canisters hissed through broken windows, filling the space with gray tendrils. Find them! Ruiz shouted, drawing his weapon. Paige backed toward a side door, her composure cracking. More shots rang out, accompanied by the sharp sound of breaking glass. Dorian's team breached from multiple points, moving with practiced efficiency through the chaos. Through the smoke, Hazel caught glimpses of dark figures advancing, heard the controlled bursts of suppressed weapons. A bullet sparked off metal near Ruiz's head. He ducked, returning fire toward the catwalks. The exchange illuminated shadows in brief, bright flashes. Hazel saw Dorian before Ruiz did. A darker shadow, moving with lethal purpose through the smoke. A guard spotted him too, squeezed off two shots. One caught Dorian's shoulder, tearing fabric and flesh. He didn't slow, dispatching the shooter with mechanical precision. Their eyes met across the warehouse. Even through the haze, Hazel saw the flash of relief in his face, quickly masked by focused rage. He moved toward her, cutting down anyone who stepped between them. Ruiz realized too late that he'd lost control of the room. He turned his gun toward Hazel, but Dorian was faster. 3 shots, chest, throat, head. Ruiz crumpled like a marionette with cut strings. Dorian reached Hazel in the next breath, blade already slicing through her restraints. The moment her hands were free, he pulled her against his chest, his heart thundering against her cheek. 1 breath. 2. Then he was moving again, positioning himself between her and any remaining threats. Stay behind me, he ordered, voice tight with controlled violence. The last pockets of resistance fell quickly. Paige made it halfway to an exit before 2 of Dorian's men cut off her escape. She tried to bargain, then threaten, finally breaking into hysteria as they zip-tied her hands. You don't understand, she babbled, all composure gone. It was supposed to be simple. Ethan sold the codes, I just made sure they went to the right buyer. That bitch was never supposed to keep anything. The house, the money, Theo. She didn't deserve any of it. A body cam light blinked red, catching every word. Distant sirens grew closer, right on schedule. Dorian's fixer would ensure the evidence reached the proper authorities. The confession, the money trails, the forged documents that would clear Hazel's name while damning Paige and her conspirators. The warehouse fell quiet, except for the echo of approaching emergency vehicles. Smoke drifted through shafts of security lighting, curling around broken glass and shell casings. Hazel stepped around. Ruiz's body, meeting Dorian in the center of the floor. Blood darkened his sleeve where the bullet had grazed him, but his eyes were clear and focused entirely on her. He reached up, fingertips brushing her cheek as if confirming she was real. "You're mine," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Not as debt, as destiny." Hazel covered his hand with hers, leaning into his touch. "And you're mine. No locked doors between us, no more walls." The first hints of dawn threatened the horizon as they left the warehouse. Theo was safe at the coastal house, protected by Dorian's most trusted lieutenant. They would return to him soon, together. In the car, Dorian's hand found Hazel's knee, his touch grounding them both. Blood was drying on his sleeve, but his voice remained steady as he gave the driver a single command. "Home." Hazel laced her fingers through his, watching the city blur past. The night's darkness was fading, and with it, the shadows that had haunted them both. For the first time since this began, she felt truly free. Not just safe, but chosen. Protected not because of obligation, but love. They drove east, toward the lightening sky, leaving behind the warehouse with its evidence and endings. Paige would face justice, Ruiz's empire would crumble, and they would build something new from the ashes of what had burned. Something stronger, founded on truth and trust rather than fear and control. Morning sunlight streamed through the coastal kitchen's windows, casting warm patterns across the marble counters. Theo stood on a step stool beside Hazel, his tongue poking out in concentration as he measured flour for pancakes. At the kitchen island, Dorian watched them, his left arm secured in a sling, but his eyes soft with an unguarded tenderness that still surprised Hazel. "More blueberries," Theo insisted, already reaching for the bowl. "Any more, and there'll be more berry than cake," Hazel laughed, but added another handful anyway. She caught Dorian's slight smile as he sipped his coffee one-handed. The week unfolded with deliberate steps toward their new normal. Monday brought the first wave of charges against Paige: financial fraud, conspiracy, and attempted kidnapping. The evidence was overwhelming: recorded confessions, paper trails, and testimony from Ruiz's captured lieutenants. By Tuesday, 3 major ports had new management as Ruiz's network imploded, their accounts frozen, and their contracts void. Wednesday delivered satisfaction in the form of Marjorie's social collapse. As news of the laundering scheme spread, her charity donors withdrew support in droves. The society pages that once praised her philanthropy now questioned every transaction, every gala, every noble gesture. She retreated to her summer house, leaving only her lawyer to handle the mounting investigations. Thursday morning found Hazel in a mahogany-paneled office, accepting a formal apology from Harrison Blake, the regional bank manager. He shuffled papers, nervously explaining how the shell accounts had triggered internal alerts that should have prompted immediate investigation. "The restoration of your funds is complete, Mrs. Quinn," he said, sliding over a folder of documents. "With interest." By Friday, Dorian had opened his legitimate business records to Hazel's scrutiny. "Build it clean," he told her, installing her as CFO across his legal enterprises. "Make it transparent but unbreakable." She spent the weekend creating new systems, setting boundaries between legitimate and shadow operations that even she wouldn't cross. The following Wednesday evening, they gathered on the cliff lawn as sunset painted the sky in fierce oranges and deep purples. A small group of trusted allies, Dorian's most loyal lieutenants and their families, witnessed as Theo stepped forward, proud in his new suit, carrying 2 simple platinum bands on a blue velvet cushion. Their vows were private, spoken in low voices that carried only to each other's ears. Dorian's promises held equal measures of possession and protection, while Hazel's words wove together strength and surrender. They chose each other with clear eyes, knowing exactly who and what they were claiming. After the guests departed, they shared dinner at their kitchen table, now marked with Theo's homework smudges and water rings from Dorian's coffee cups. Theo picked at his vegetables, more interested in describing his science project than eating. "If I connect the circuits right," he explained, gesturing with his fork, "the whole model solar system will light up." "Eat your carrots first," Hazel reminded him, then smiled at Dorian. "And you? Still wearing that crooked tie?" Dorian touched the imperfect knot that Theo had made days ago. "It's lucky," he said simply, and they all knew he'd wear it until it fell apart. Later, as Dorian washed dishes with his sleeves rolled up, his shoulder finally healing enough for light duty, Hazel noticed his pistol still resting on the counter. It was a reminder that danger hadn't vanished. It had simply been pushed back to respectful distances. They were realistic about the world they lived in, but they'd carved out this space where fear couldn't reach. Theo's bedroom light went out at 9 after his usual 2-story negotiation. Hazel checked the locks, not from paranoia now, but routine. Through the windows, city lights glimmered distantly. Out there, Dorian's name still commanded fear and respect, his reputation for ruthless efficiency unchanged. But here, within these walls, he was simply theirs. They'd built something rare, a home that was shelter rather than cage, protected by choice rather than necessity. Hazel moved through their evening routine, setting the coffee maker for morning, while Dorian checked the security feeds one last time. The domesticity of it felt earned rather than imposed. In their bedroom, Hazel found Dorian already changed for sleep, his injured shoulder clearly bothering. Him, though, he'd never admit it. She helped him with the sling, her touch gentle but matter-of-fact. They'd learned each other's limits and triggers, when to push and when to yield. "The Singapore accounts are clear," she told him, switching to business as she changed into sleep clothes. "We can start transitioning the shipping contracts next week." "Tomorrow," he replied, settling into bed. "Tonight is ours." She smiled, sliding in beside him. This was their victory, not just survival, but building something sustainable from the ashes of threat and betrayal. They'd forged their bond in crisis, but chose to maintain it in peace, adding small daily rituals to their larger promises. The house hummed quietly with security systems and climate control. Outside, waves crashed against the cliffs in eternal rhythm. Hazel felt Dorian's breathing even out beside her, his guard lowered only here, only with them. Theo's nightlight cast a gentle glow under his door across the hall. They were still who they had always been, a syndicate boss, a widow, a watchful child. But they were more now, a family who had chosen each other with clear eyes and full hearts, who understood both the darkness and the light in their shared world. They were bound not by fear or obligation, but by something stronger, love that had been tested by fire and emerged unbroken.